people who haven't seen it?
It was a film. It was a kind of a black humor look at how someone gets elected in our country at that time, 1970. And the point the film wanted to make was that we were electing people by cosmetics rather than substance. And I was playing the sacrificial character of a character who looked, they were selling my appearance rather than who I was, and they were trying to coach me on the substance end. But it was really about how I looked, and that was the film.
Mr. McKay, you now have 1 minute to sum up. Mr. McKay.
In the beginning, I think it's important to note what subjects we haven't discussed. We've completely ignored the fact that this is a society divided by fear, hatred, and violence. And until we talk about just what this society really is, then I don't know how we're going to change it. For example, we haven't discussed the rot that destroys our cities. We have all the resources we need to check it, and we don't use them. And we haven't discussed why not. We haven't discussed race in this country. We haven't discussed poverty. In short, we haven't discussed any of the sicknesses that may yet send this country up in flames. And we better do it. We'd better get it out in the open and confront it before it's too late.
And what happened in about 2 weeks, I was going to make The Way We Were. And that was going to be in about 2 months in northern New York. And I was waiting, so I read the paper. And suddenly these little blurbs started to appear, you know, and they would increase a little bit. Always had to do a byline. I didn't pay attention to what the names were, just two names always. And then it got up to slush fund and da-da-da, and I thought, I was like a cheerleader on the side. Anyway, this thing went on, and finally erupted into a big deal. And then other newspapers, like the New York Times and other papers, got involved when it reached a certain level. And then it erupted into a big deal. Then it was proven, it was these two guys. And I read, and then it went the other way because of some false thing with the grand jury testimony. It was a semantic glitch of some kind, and they were wrong. Nixon then did get reelected, and he went after the Washington Post, hook, line, and sinker, and after the two guys. And I read a little story in some side piece about who the two guys were that caused all this trouble. And when I saw that one guy was a Jew and the other guy was a WASP, one guy was an extreme liberal and the other guy was a really right-wing, not a right-wing, but Republicans, and they didn't like each other. And one was a good writer and the other guy wasn't very much, and yet they had to work together. I thought, wow, that must be an interesting story. I mean, I wasn't so much focused on the bigger picture as much as what was it like for that dynamic to work together. So I wanted to get a hold of them to see if there was a little black and white movie that I might produce with two unknown actors and just deal with that little part of the summer when they were doing that work. So I tried to call them and they didn't return my calls. It went on for a couple of months and finally I got Woodward later on. He was cold. And he said, hi, and I said, Bob Redford. He said, yeah. He wasn't too excited by that. And I said, I wanted to know if I could talk to you and your partner. I have an idea. And he said, well, we're busy right now, and it's not a good time. So he kind of blew me off. So I let it drop. But it was still in my mind. I thought it could be a really interesting story. But I went on to other things and was making another movie in Chicago in February when James McCord writes a letter to Judge Sirica saying, it's true. We were hired by the committee to read, and suddenly the whole thing turned back around. The guys were right. So I called Woodward and I said, look, can I just, I don't know why you don't want to talk to me. Can I just talk to you? It's an idea. That's all. He said, okay, meet me. Can you get to D.C.? And I said, yes. And it was all very cloak and dagger, and we met.
So you're deep throat. Oh, no.
Well, no, I was being treated like that. He said, don't meet me. Go here and don't tell anybody here. And go in the back and sit in the third seat. So I met him, and then he apologized. He said, I didn't think it was you. He said, when you called. We were so nervous and paranoid, we thought we were being set up. And so I didn't believe it was you. And I said, well, here I am. This is what I'm interested in. He said, my partner, this is not a good place for us to talk. It's a tough time. I'll come up to New York to your apartment. They came up in late February, and we had a long 8-hour meeting. I told them what I wanted to do, and they said, look, we're going to be writing a book about all this. By this time, things were escalating in ways that I hadn't imagined. And I said, well, look, you know, I don't really need you to write a book. I'm only interested if you guys could just give me the rights to do this. I'm interested in only this period of time. I don't know where this thing is going. And they said, well, we don't either. The Washington Post was very nervous about us. They were very cooperative, but also very, very nervous that this was Hollywood and it could hurt them. So they had two faces with that, and I understood that. But Bob and Carl finally let me see their notes for their interviews, and we were able to take those notes and construct scenes, literally from their notes. Anyway, the film got made, and the rest speaks for itself. But in the meantime, this little thing was burgeoning into this gigantic historical event that I never dreamed was going to happen. So by the time the film came out, Nixon had resigned, and it was a big deal.
Let's go to All the President's Men.
The story is dry. All we've got are pieces. We can't seem to figure out what the puzzle is supposed to look like. John Mitchell resigns as the head of CREEP and says that he wants to spend more time with his family. That sounds like bullshit. We don't exactly believe that.
No, but it's touching. Forget the myths that the media has created about the White House. The truth is, these are not very bright guys, and things got out of hand.
Hunt's come in from the cold. Supposedly he's got a lawyer with $25,000 in a brown paper bag.
Follow the money.
What do you mean? Where?
Oh, I can't tell you that.
But you could tell me that.
No, I have to do this my way. You tell me what you know, and I'll confirm. I'll keep you in the right direction if I can, but that's all. Just follow the money.
Issues that you take on that other people don't. For example, speaking up for Native Americans, you narrated the incident at Oglala about Leonard Peltier. Why did you choose to do that?
Again, it was the story beneath the story that was out there. I felt that what his case, because I was already very much involved and interested in Native American rights and issues. I had made some documentaries about it through the 70s. And I got a call from Peter Matheson, the writer, who was wanting to write a book about Leonard. This was back in 1980. And Leonard had just been sent to Marion's prison in Marion, Illinois. High security prison. He contacted me and we talked about it. And I knew a little bit about his story on Pine Ridge and that he was being abused by the law. He wasn't getting a fair trial. And that they had lured him across from Canada. He had been a fugitive, and they'd lured him across from Canada on the pretense that he would be treated fairly, and he wasn't. Once he crossed the border, they nailed him and put him in jail. Because the other two had gotten off by poor lawyering. And so Peter was going to be writing this book, and he said, look, maybe you can help. He said, the guy's in Marion prison, and there's a rumor floating around they're going to take him out and kill him. And he said, maybe if you went in there, because I just finished a film about a warden called Brubaker, and that was just out in the cinemas and getting a lot of attention. So he said, maybe if you went there. So I did. And when I went there, I met a lot of political activists that were trying to help Leonard. And we met in a hotel room, and they were very secretive and all that. And they said, we were being followed or bugged. And I said, well, what can we do? And they said, well, if you could just go in there and it be known that you're going in, that maybe you could see him, and maybe just your appearance would keep something from happening. Now, I didn't know whether that was going to be true or not, but I was certainly willing to do that. So I went in and met the warden, and it was a big deal, you know, me coming into the prison and so forth. So they took me down into these layers of cell blocks, into the deepest security. And the honor at that time was I was the first person allowed to see Leonard live without a glass in front of us. And I spent 45 minutes with him, that was all. And I was convinced after that 45 minutes that he was getting maltreated, and that it was not fair, that he was, what I was seeing was a misapplication of justice, and that there was a double standard in the law, and that he was being victimized. It was going to be an eye for an eye as far as the FBI was concerned, because they had blown the case for the other two, so somebody was going to pay.